So what I want to do is I want to move on to the next slide there. Is that okay? Down here. That's great. I just want to go through what the goals for today are, okay? And we throw this word cognition around a lot, and it's actually a very, very straightforward word that we use to describe things that we're going to talk about in a minute, okay? But it's obviously something that we'd like you to have a deeper knowledge of as well, because obviously migraine is such, learning about thinking and learning about what different areas of your thinking, because that's just another word for cognition, is really, really important, I feel. How the idea of brain fog is very unhelpful. I'm not a fan of this term, and I'll go through why I think it is a very unhelpful term. Also, the impact of migraine cognitive functions and how they affect daily functioning. Kim is going to take the lead on that, and delving deeper then into kind of causes, individual variability, and the transient nature of cognitive symptoms of migraine. That's the thing about the ebb and flow. The cognitive difficulties that a person can have when they're having a migraine headache, or in the period before it or after it. It's I've said this to so many different people that I've worked with different chronic illnesses, and what I've always said is, there's common symptoms to each to a difficulty, whether it's like MS, whether it's migraine, whether it's living with a transplanted kidney. There are common factors to that are absolutely part and parcel of describing the difficulty. But how a person experiences those factors or those symptoms or whatever you want to call them is absolutely unique to them. Okay. And that's, I think, the analogy of thinking about fingerprinting and how that we all have fingerprints, but they're absolutely individual to each one of us. No two fingerprints are the same. So I think if you think about your experience of migraine in that context, I think it'll be really nice then to maybe have a think about the things we hope you will learn today. I'm going to talk about lifestyle management modifications to manage cognitive related migraine symptoms. Often the things that we know can help with cognitive related migraine symptoms are the basics that aren't that basic in lots of ways, because I often feel like getting the basics right is actually a tricky thing. But it's things like sleep, it's things like proper nutrition, it's things like resting, and recuperation. And it's really, really important. I think that we empower you guys to know as much as you can about those different factors, because we know they can make a difference. But I have a sense you guys would probably know a lot about this anyway, right? But I want to put it together and just to kind of validate, I'm sure, the knowledge that is the vast amount of knowledge that is out there today. I'm looking here, and I'm seeing there's 39 participants, and kind of an exercise I do when I do groups with people who are living with things like migraine, is I often ask them, how long have you had it? Okay. And I go around and ask each person how long they think they've had the difficulty. And like, even in a room of 10 people, you can come up to like 250 to 300 years worth of experience living with the difficulty. And I think that's a massive amount of knowledge and to be there, to be tapped into. And I think that, just remember that you guys are experts by experiences. What it is day to day to live with migraine and how that can impact your cognitive symptoms. So I just want you to understand and validate and honor your experience and your knowledge of this. I think anyone who knows me or talks to me as a psychologist for, I don't know, 10 seconds, Kim, maybe, they'll know that I'm a huge fan of compassion focused therapy, and I think everyone should do it. And I use it with such a broad range of presentations here in the hospital. And I just want to kind of introduce that idea today in terms of, what I feel that the absolute, like the hugely helpful concept of self-compassion and how that can be really helpful for people who are living with migraine every day of their lives. And I think that's really important to have a think about that today, and to kind of say, it's a factor that I believe is really, really important for helping people live the best life they can with migraine. Okay. Now, as we say, right, anytime we do these talks, it's really, really important for us to remind you that we're not your treating team. We're not the medical professionals that work with you on a day-to-day basis or weekly basis or yearly basis with your experience of migraine. But we really, really want you to know that, we're going to map out for you today when you need to go seek professional help for anything that we talk about here. It's more about psychoeducation, education on lifestyle management. But it's really important to know that if your migraine has changed or you felt, there's differences in your cognitive ability in the recent times, go to your medical professional, whether it's a GP or neurologist. That's a standing order for today, that whatever we talk about in terms of what we know about migraine, in terms of how it can pan out and, the depth of the impact on cognition potentially, if you feel any differences in your cognition or your migraine, please go seek medical or professional help. It's really, really important. Okay. There's going to be a short Q&A session at the end, which we're all really looking forward to, because we just the creativity that goes into people's questions and the insight that can be involved in them is always amazing. So we're really looking forward to that. So there's a lot to get done. So if we do clip up along at a little bit of a quick pace, I apologize, but we just have to get a lot in today. Is that okay? Yeah, thank you. So I'm just going to basically start off with just talking about what is cognition. Okay. There's lots of different definitions for this. Some people say it's a product of the brain or mental processes. I love the term thinking skills, and it includes things like perception. So how you perceive things, whether it's, how you hear things, how you see things, how you touch things, anything to do with your senses. It involves memory. It involves attention, planning, and decision-making. So they're the kind of pillars of what we call cognitive functioning or thinking skills. They obviously play a vital role in our daily life, from making, very simple decisions, cornflakes or Weetabix, right? Or problem solving at work or school, or what am I going to do with my life? That all comes under the very broad church of what we say when we say cognition, okay? So if cognition is an ability, okay, or it's a product of the brain, and anything that goes on in the brain can have a difficulty, okay? And cognitive difficulties can arise from various conditions, inclusive of migraine. They can interfere with performance at work, school, family and social life, and also with the self-management of your migraine attack. So that's the other thing. It's not only, it's kind of a double-edged sword in the sense that it is the cognitive difficulties of your migraine, that Kim will talk about in a minute. Those are difficult in and of themselves, right? From a kind of just a functioning perspective. But also how you cope, how you manage your migraine can be very much impacted as well by your cognitive difficulties. So if you're getting up and you're saying, I have a migraine today, it's really, really bad, I need to do something about this. Can often be very hard, as one of my patients said once, I think it's a fantastic phrase, to stitch a thought together. It can be difficult to help yourself. Okay. And that's what I'm trying to say. There's angles on this in the sense that it is the impact of the cognitive difficulties themselves and how you feel and how you cope, but also how you help yourself. And I think that's really, really important. And as I said there, it can interfere with performance at work, school, family and social life, and also with the self-management of the attacks. Okay. So it's a bit of a bugbear of mine. Anyone talks to me, I have a couple of bugbears. This is my favorite one. The whole kind of brain fog thing, right? So let's call a spade a spade. It's unhelpful, right? And for a number of reasons. It lacks specificity. It doesn't accurately convey the complexity of the cognitive symptoms we know that are associated with migraine. So it's kind of like, imagine if you came in to see a doctor or a neurologist, or we'll take it out of the medical profession for a second, right? But if you went into your mechanic and there was something wrong with your car, and he comes out and he says, well, I stuck the thing in, the computer says no, it's kind of like, it's got kind of engine fog. You know what I mean? I don't think you would be very happy with that. You probably wouldn't, hand over your hard-earned cash to get that car fixed, right? And sometimes, the mechanic will come back and say, well, look, this is the state of the art here. This is what we could do. You mightn't be happy with it, but at least there's a specificity to what you know about that engine. And that's why I think a term like brain fog, when we're thinking about cognitive difficulties, is not helpful. I think it downplays it as well. I mean, I don't think I would be happy if someone said, oh, you're a bit brain foggy today with the old migraine. I just don't think that's helpful. I think it just minimizes the impact that these difficulties can have across a range of domains in your life. It's a hindrance to understanding. I think I've alluded to that. It might prevent people from seeking proper help or managers. So I'm just a bit off today. I might be a bit dehydrated. You might be a bit dehydrated, but hopefully I'm going to we're going to talk through today with the kind of the shape of the cognitive difficulties specific to migraine. The complexity of the cognitive impact can be minimized. There can be, different types of areas of cognition may be affected, and it doesn't really get you to understand what is going on there, particularly across different domains that might be affected. The severity of the cognitive difficulties can vary from person to person. And I think if you just said brain fog, it just does not get the nuance of that. And, it's really important to know that, cognitive difficulties can occur before, during, and after, and in some cases between migraine attacks, right? So there can be confounding factors as well, like anxiety, depression, or sleep quality. So there's all these different things that are happening and influencing your experience of the cognitive difficulties related to migraine. But if you call it brain fog, you're going to just paper over that nuance. And I just don't think that's very helpful. So I'm going to stop my rant about that now, because I was allowed to do one slide in it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the impact of migraine on cognitive functions. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over to Kim, and she's going to do a really nice piece on that, so we can start to understand, okay, how does migraine pan out for people typically, but obviously very individual to each person, and how does it impact different areas of cognitive functioning that we know? Okay, so I'm just going to hand you over to Kim. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So I'm just going to blur my background there. Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm going to touch on the impact of migraine on various cognitive functions. And this mind map here on the screen illustrates the different cognitive domains commonly affected by migraine. So the domains highlighted in purple, processing speed, attention, memory, are the most frequently reported and most consistently found to be impaired on research on individuals with migraine. And difficulty in the domains highlighted in blue, language, executive function, and visual spatial processing, have also been observed, but may not be as consistently affected or have received less focus in the literature, at least. So let me walk you through each one of them. Processing speed. So many individuals with migraine report a slowed or decreased processing speed, making it more challenging for them to think and react quickly. Next, attention. Attention is a really critical cognitive domain that's also affected by migraine. And this can include sustained attention, so the ability to focus on tasks for an extended period or sustained period of time, as well as immediate attention, which involves quickly shifting focus in response to stimuli. In terms of memory impairment, some people with migraine experience difficulties in verbal memory, which includes the ability to remember and recall words and language-related information. Migraine can also impact visual memory, so affecting the ability for someone to retain and retrieve visual information. Next, language and verbal skills. Some people experience difficulties with language, such as finding the right words or forming coherent sentences during migraine attacks. And lastly, executive functioning. This refers to ability to plan, organize, and manage tasks efficiently, while executive dysfunction is the opposite of this, so a dysfunction in executive functioning, and it manifests in problems like impaired problem solving, decision-making, planning, sequencing, and working memory. I forgot one there. Migraine may also impact visual spatial processing, which is essential for tasks like navigation and hand-eye coordination. So I'll touch more on how these cognitive functions affect daily functioning more in depth in my next slide. But before we move on to that, I want to touch on some confounding factors that can further complicate the relationship between migraine and cognitive functions, as Paul has actually touched on a little bit earlier. So the list is down there at the bottom left of the screen. So pain, visual sensory auras, comorbidities, sleep, and medication. So the pain associated with migraine attacks can be intense and all-consuming, which can divert your cognitive resources away from other tasks. And pain in general is also known to affect memory and decision-making. Next, auras, which can include visual disturbances, sensory changes, or other neurological symptoms may temporarily disrupt cognitive processes. And it's also been noted that migraine with aura patients can display more prominent cognitive changes. Next, comorbid conditions. Conditions like anxiety and depression often coexist with migraine and can actually independently affect cognitive function. And I'm not sure if Paul, you want to maybe comment on that, just because I know he knows a little bit more about that.
I suppose what we do know as well is that, you know, cognitive difficulties can happen also related to difficulties that we know that happen comorbidly or together with migraine. So often people with migraine will have, you know, comorbid depression or anxiety difficulties, right? But what we do know additionally is that having maybe a diagnosis of depression, particularly major depressive disorder, we know that that in and of itself can affect your cognitive ability. It can affect attention, it can affect memory, and it can also, in some cases, if it's something like a bipolar disorder, it can actually impact your executive functioning skills, or those planning, organizing, you know, impulse control, you know, that kind of more abstract thinking as well that we need to do. So I think what's really interesting is that in and of itself, migraine can cause cognitive difficulties, okay? But also comorbidities like depression and anxiety have in and of themselves cognitive difficulties built into them that may occur. Now, it's not for everyone, by the way, so I just want to put a caveat on that. Not everyone who has depression or anxiety will have these cognitive difficulties, but it is common amongst those groups of people that cognitive difficulties such as attention problems or verbal memory or autobiographical memories, another one, so memory about parts of your past or yourself, that can be problematic as well for them as well. So I just want to kind of, we kind of want to bake in there as well that kind of an increased understanding of that, you know, there are cognitive difficulties that can happen as well related to difficulties that happen in parallel with migraine. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, and lastly on that list, there's medication. So some medications used to manage migraines may also have cognitive side effects, and this just adds like an extra layer of complexity to the cognitive picture that we see here. And understanding these confounding factors is crucial. They can make it challenging to pinpoint whether the cognitive difficulties are solely due to the migraine or influenced by other variables, as Paul highlighted there. So as we explore strategies for managing cognitive symptoms later in this presentation, keep in mind that addressing these confounding factors may be a key part of the solution. All right, so now I want to turn our attention to the real-life impact of cognitive symptoms in migraine. And this table here summarizes very well how these symptoms can manifest in various aspects of our lives, including our functioning at work, school, and in our day-to-day activities. So let me walk you through each domain. First of all, slow processing speed. This could manifest as difficulty processing information. For example, in a work setting, you may find yourself struggling to keep up with tasks that require quick decision-making or multitasking. Next, deficits in attention. This may look like difficulty concentrating and focusing. And in a real-life setting, not being able to focus during a conversation, for example, could strain your relationships. Moving on, memory impairments and forgetfulness. These could, for example, lead to missed deadlines or important dates. And language impaired communication or verbal skills. These could hinder effective communication, especially in professions or work-life settings where you're required to really communicate clearly. And lastly, impaired decision-making or problem-solving or executive dysfunction more generally. This could translate into difficulties managing your finances and problems organizing or planning ahead, for example. So what lies beneath the cognitive symptoms in migraine? These symptoms seem to be a result of complex changes occurring in the central nervous system during a migraine attack. And listed on the slide are some of the key factors thought to contribute to the development of these cognitive symptoms. So I'm just going to read the list here. Altered blood flow and oxygen levels in the brain, activation of pain pathways that can affect cognition, neurotransmitter imbalances, particularly serotonin, inflammation and oxidative stress, cortical spreading depression, a wave of disrupted brain activity. So first of all, the altered blood flow and oxygen levels. Migraine can cause shifts in blood flow and oxygen levels within the brain, and these fluctuations can impact cognitive function, leading to symptoms like difficulty concentrating. And next, during a migraine attack, pain pathways in the brain can become highly activated, and this heightened pain response can spill over into other cognitive processes affecting memory and information processing. Thirdly, serotonin, a neurotransmitter that plays a vital role in mood regulation, is also often disrupted in migraine, and such imbalances can contribute to cognitive symptoms, as serotonin also influences cognitive function. Inflammation and oxidative stress. This is a common feature of migraine, and in and of itself can harm brain cells and disrupt their normal functioning, including cognition. And lastly, cortical spreading depression. This is a complex phenomenon involving a wave of disrupted brain activity, and it's often observed during migraine attacks. And researchers think that it can lead to changes in brain function, contributing to symptoms like memory problems. But it's essential to stress that all of these changes are typically reversible, which brings me on to my next slide. Transient. So cognitive symptoms can be really, really distressing, but one of the reassuring aspects is that they're usually transient, or in other words, temporary. So once the migraine attack subsides, cognitive function seems to return to baseline levels. And this finding has been supported by longitudinal studies, which basically means research studies conducted over an extended period of time to capture changes over time. And the key takeaway from most of these longitudinal studies, including the ones listed on the screen there, suggests that individuals with migraine may not be at a significantly increased risk of cognitive decline over time. So this means that whilst cognitive symptoms may occur during migraine attacks, they do not necessarily indicate a long-term cognitive decline or impairment. However, as always in the realm of medical research, individual experiences can vary and there can be exceptions. And really further research is needed to fully understand the complexities of this relationship between migraine and cognitive functioning. And I think that's a really reassuring note for individuals living with migraine and anyone in the audience who has experienced migraine-related cognitive symptoms. So next, individual variability. It's crucial to recognize that this impact on cognition varies significantly from one individual to another. Migraine symptoms seem to vary from person to person. Like Paul said, everyone has a temperament. Migraine is the same thing. And so does its effect on cognition. So while some individuals may experience only mild cognitive symptoms during migraine attacks, others may have more pronounced and noticeable difficulties. Why does this variability occur? Well, there's several migraine-related factors that can influence whether someone develops cognitive symptoms or not. And these factors include disease duration, frequency and duration of attacks, presence or absence of aura, and pain intensity. So disease duration. The length of time that a person has been living with migraine can influence cognitive symptoms. Those with longer migraine histories might have different cognitive experiences than those with recent diagnoses. Next, frequency and duration of attacks. So individuals who experience frequent and long-lasting migraine attacks may be more prone to cognitive difficulties. And patients with migraine with aura characterized by sensory disturbances or visual changes preceding or accompanying the attacks, can also impact cognitive symptoms. And lastly, the intensity of pain during migraine attacks can also be a significant factor in determining the extent of cognitive symptoms. For instance, over here, research suggests that increased frequency and longer durations of migraine attacks are correlated with worse cognitive function. And it's important to really understand these associations, as they can help individuals and healthcare providers better anticipate and manage these cognitive symptoms. And it's essential to note that the cognitive impact of migraine doesn't exist in isolation. As mentioned on and on again earlier, a range of other factors can also influence cognitive functioning, even in the absence of migraine, and it's listed here again. So pain, stress, sleep quality, overall health, comorbidities, medication, all of that. So while migraine is undoubtedly a contributor to cognitive symptoms for many, it's just one piece of a larger puzzle. And understanding this complexity allows us to approach both the management of cognitive difficulties and migraine symptoms in a holistic manner, and taking into account both migraine-related and other contributing factors. I'm going to pass the laptop back to Paul now.
Thank you, Kim, for that. You condensed about, I don't know, 40 years of neuropsychological research into migraine in about 5 or 6 slides. So well done. That was really interesting. Thank you for that. We've spoken a lot thus far about the cognitive aspects of, I hope you have a better understanding now of the cognitive aspects of migraine and what the difficulties can actually look like, for want of a better phrase, in real life. Okay. So that's kind of the more kind of model-based or kind of neuropsychological knowledge we have of migraine, which, as I'm sure you can all agree, will have to improve. And the more research we have about those different areas and the impacts that migraine has on them is essential as we go forward and try to learn more and do more for people who have this life experience. But what I want to kind of factor into now or focus on, and it's something that Kim talked about there at the end of her part of the presentation, which was, how do we now, knowing what we know about the cognitive impact, what kind of things can we do practically on a day-to-day basis to help you manage those cognitive difficulties, or, maybe prevent them from occurring more often, or when they do occur, that they're not as bad. And I just feel that it's really important for us to also talk about what kind of practical things you can do on a day-to-day basis. Okay. I'm sure a lot of you are doing these already, okay, in some shape or form, or you may have heard from people who have different difficulties to you, maybe something like MS or epilepsy or something like that, that there's kind of, you may hear things that you've heard before, because you know what, it's all coming from the same type of body, which is a human body. And the things that we know that can sustain people and help them live a kind of as balanced a life as possible, because we all live in a really, really busy time in human history, and it's often very difficult to do the things that I'm going to talk to you about now. But it's these basic practical things that we know can be really, really helpful for the general management of your migraine, but also to minimize the impact of potential cognitive difficulties. I'm going to go through those with you. I don't think I would be worth my salt as a clinical psychologist if I didn't talk about stress management. Is it possible to live a life without stress? No, in my opinion. But I think we all need to endeavor to reduce our stress as much as possible, because we know that it can have significant impacts over the lifespan on lots of different areas of your health. Okay, so I suppose the thing about migraine and the thing about what we're talking about today in terms of cognitive difficulties, stress management really comes to the fore, okay? Because the practice of stress reduction techniques like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, or deep breathing exercises to manage stress is really, really important, because it's going to reduce the impact of your migraine, hopefully, and the cognitive difficulties associated with it. But the one thing about stress management is I put those those different techniques in there with meditation, yoga, and things, which are amazing, okay, and they're really, really helpful. They're skills, they can be learned over time, and anyone can do them, okay. But I also like to talk about kind of basic things, even outside of those techniques, that you could do on a day-to-day basis to reduce your stress. And it can literally be doing things like making sure you get a good night's sleep. Okay, something like that, which sounds very basic, so I absolutely understand that. And I know it can be tricky to actually do on a day-to-day basis or a nightly basis, but that can reduce your stress so much, because your brain, it's constantly healing itself, it's constantly rejuvenating itself, and it needs to sort of go offline a bit at night to do that reparative work. Okay. Your brain is working, it doesn't shut off, of course, right? Because it's this kind of autonomic function that's going on all the time, whether it's you're maintaining your heart and making sure your lungs are working, but it also needs to kind of sort itself out. And it's like anything, it does need to rest a bit as well. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense to make sure that your brain is in the best shape possible for the next day by trying to get good sleep. And I know that's a challenge with migraine, I absolutely understand that, but at the same time, when you're thinking about how do I break this stress management thing back down to first principles, good sleep is so important if you can, or improve sleep. Okay. That's one thing. Again, making time for yourself during the day. If you can take 20 minutes of just, as I call it, meh time, just sitting there doing nothing, whatever it is, if you can do that for just even 20 minutes regularly, that is something that is going to help manage your stress. Okay. Again, if you've got like so many of us do, a very busy work-life balance, that's you have a very busy life, and work-life balance is a tricky thing to get right. Trying to get that right, trying to manage your stress, trying to proactively deal with issues, whether it's in your personal life or whether it's in your day-to-day job, is so important, because that's going to manage your stress. That's going to keep the cortisol out of your blood a bit more, and it's going to help with managing the headache, the migraine headaches, and the cognitive difficulties related to it too. So it's those basic things. It's like rest, time for yourself, good sleep, trying to problem solve around things that are making you stressed. I know it's really, really easier said than done, but we do know that in concert with those other really lovely techniques, which is like meditation and yoga, you can't beat the basics. You really, really can't. And I think that's really, really important. Okay. Mindfulness is so important as well. As I said, engaging in mindfulness or relaxation exercises. We know there's so much stuff written on this now across many different areas of academia that it does improve, or reduce your level of stress. And we know that can improve cognitive function. So even if you think of it from this perspective, if you are trying to remember something, or if you are trying to work out a problem in the moment, adding too much stress into that is really, really going to impact on your ability to function, because your brain has only a certain amount of resources to give to different function that it needs to do on a moment-to-moment basis. And it is very efficient at doing that, right? It's incredible how it does it. But if you're adding stress into the mix on top of, okay, the burden of having migraine in your life, it just impacts on your brain, in the sense that your brain is going to say, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to have to do something here about this pain. I'm going to have to help get the heart rate down. I'm going to have to do all these other things. And that leaves less resources for cognitive functioning, because your brain is the ultimate prioritizer. It will prioritize. It is ruthless with what it needs to do, and has a hierarchy of things, keeping you safe, keeping you breathing, keeping you alive. And it would go for those every time. Okay. So if you can bring or reduce that stress by doing something like mindfulness and relaxation. And when I talk about relaxation, guys, whatever it is, if you're into collecting stamps, if you're into looking at Star Wars, if you're into looking at trains, or you're into going on your bike and you feel relaxed doing that, just do it. That's it. Okay. This isn't rocket science in lots of ways, because what I want to do is validate stuff that I know you can do and are probably doing, trying to manage your migraine, because it has a knock-on positive effect on your cognitive functioning as well. So in terms of dietary adjustments, low tyrosine diets, some people find this helpful. Okay, I'm not an expert on this area, of course, but our review has found that, Some people find relief from migraines by avoiding foods high in tyramine, such as aged cheese, processed meats, and certain fermented foods. Hydration, hydration, hydration. Your brain is made of about 70% water. Okay, it needs water. It takes 20% of all the oxygen you take in and every breath. That's why it starts to die after 4 minutes. Okay, so it's really important for it to get those basics, oxygen, and proper relaxation and mindfulness can help you with that, but also hydration can give you the brain that thing it needs a lot of, which is water and what it needs for it, because it is literally 70% water. Okay. Regular meals and avoiding triggers, a regular eating schedule. Skipping meals can trigger migraine for some people, as we all know. So maintaining a consistent meal schedule to stabilize blood sugar is so important. So if you have a spike in your blood sugars, we know that can again be a trigger for your migraine. So I suppose what I'm trying to get across here, and I think there's millions and millions and billions of dollars and euros spent on encouraging people to do these things every year, okay, which is to hydrate, get better sleep, eat regularly, eat, healthy food. I understand as well how difficult it is sometimes with the types of lives we lead, but I just really want to remind you that these tools are here for you to help you with your managing migraine and also your cognitive functioning, right? Identify and avoid triggers. I mean, I'm sure you're all, experts on what triggers your migraine for you, because your experience. No one knows your experience better than you. But sometimes if it gets a little bit complicated and you're kind of trying to feel out, okay, what is triggering my migraine from a dietary perspective, a food diary can be helpful, and avoiding dietary triggers that can lead to migraines, which in turn impacts cognition. So I hope you're starting to see that the knock-on effect here from doing these things is from a body perspective and from managing the migraine itself, has a very positive knock-on effect as well on helping your cognition. Limit caffeine and alcohol, okay? Gradually reduce your caffeine intake, as both too much or sudden withdrawal can trigger migraines, okay? It can also be a contributor to cognitive difficulties as well. Again, it's imbalanced. It brings you right up and it brings you back down as well. And like anything, to get that kick from it, that thing that helps you, what you probably took it for in the first instance, which might be for energy or might be for focus, okay? Over time, that has a kind of a limiting, that effect diminishes because you have to take more and more coffee for that to happen. And there's a ceiling on that as well. So just stuff like that, limiting caffeine and alcohol is really important, because limiting alcohol consumption, it can be, as we're saying, it can be a trigger for migraine as well for some people. So again, working on the cognition by doing these basic things, which I know they're basic to understand, but hard to implement. I totally understand that. They can have the knock-on effect of helping with your cognitive ability. As we said, hydration, sleep hygiene. Okay, screen time and lighting. What we do know that using blue light filters on screens and devices and reducing eye strain and potential migraine triggers can be helpful for some people. Again, it goes back to the individuality piece. Proper lighting, ensure your workspace and home are well lit to reduce eye strain. Okay, again, giving your brain the best chance possible to do what it needs to do, to think and to use all those domains that we talked about. Okay, again, just on the sleep thing, a dark or quiet sleep environment is really important. And so much of a good night's sleep, again, is related to temperature. Okay, so a warm bed, a little bit of a colder room is usually a good rule of thumb as well. Okay, and what I always say to people when I'm talking to them about sleep hygiene, because it's something I talk a lot about as well, I find if you can, and whatever you need to do this, it was different for each person, whether it's relaxing, listening to music, something like that. But I would recommend sliding into sleep if you can, because it's funny, like, because I often find people say to me when they're trying to change their sleep hygiene and improve it a bit, they'll say, well, I really tried to get to sleep last night. It's probably, I love the motivation and it's really important to do that, but sliding into sleep, making things, lowering the lights, having the temperature of your bed right, helps to limit the overload of your senses, is going to help you with your cognitive ability, because because it gives your brain more resources that it can put into maintaining your cognitive functioning more effectively, because it can prioritize that then if it doesn't have to worry about sensory overload. Regular exercise, guys. Quit smoking. It's really, 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 really a really good thing to do. I'm stating the obvious, but it can have, we do know that in terms of what it does to the vasculature even of your brain, and what it can do to, in so many ways your brain can be impacted by smoking, and it is such a bad thing to be doing. So if you could, and I know again it's really easier said than done, it's really important if you can to stop smoking. Medication management, again, consult with your healthcare provider or neurologist to discuss your prescription medications. That's not our bag, by the way, but that can help prevent migraines. I'm stating the obvious here. And by extension, if you're helping manage the pain better and you're experiencing migraine, you're going to improve your cognitive difficulties as well. Stay informed. I think all of you here, the people that are here today, that have turned up to this talk, hopefully that, it has helped you with this aspect of what we think is helpful in terms of education. Stay informed about migraine triggers and treatments through reliable sources, okay? And support groups, more on that later, okay? Consider joining a migraine support group or seeking counseling to manage the emotional impact of migraines, which can indirectly affect cognition. So a lot of my work, when I work with people who have maybe neurological problems that are very impactful in terms of the impact that they have on cognition, whether it's epilepsy, MS, or migraine, helping them manage the emotional impact of that can really, really help them manage the cognition piece as well, as that is more balanced. Okay. Gradual re-engagement, there should be some stuff on that there. What I mean by that is, if you've had a particularly, difficult time with your migraine, you've had the frequency and intensity have gone up over a number of weeks or whatnot, just be kind to yourself. Gradually re-engage back into your daily routine or the social relationships that you have and things like that, because pushing yourself too much too soon can impact your migraine, obviously, and by proxy, the cognitive difficulties associated with it. So, self-compassion, okay? I should probably get some sort of a tattoo or a t-shirt of this, because I just keep on going on about it so much. But before, because I feel now myself and Kim have spoken a lot, right? And we don't want to bore you, right? So what I want to do is just have a little bit of, don't worry, there's no role plays asked for or anything like that. You don't have to sing a song or anything like that, or which might be nice, but I think, just to keep everything de-stressed here, you don't have to do anything like that. What we're basically going to ask you is, and if you could put your responses into the chat, what's your understanding of self-compassion? What does that phrase mean? So I'm going to give you 2 or 3 minutes there to get your responses in, and I don't know, could Deirdre read some of them out or something when they get in? Yeah, for a couple of minutes, but we'll just give people 2 minutes there just to put into the chat. What do you think? What comes to mind when you think of that phrase or that term, self-compassion? I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Great.
Yeah. Be kind to yourself like you are to others.
Yeah.
Acceptance, looking after yourself as you would look after a dear friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Care for yourself, allowing myself to rest. Giving yourself a break. Let's go back up. Allowing myself to rest when needed without judgment.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Patience. Yeah. Being understanding of yourself and not blaming yourself, as migraine is something you don't often have control over. You don't ever have control over, really. Patience.
Yeah, absolutely. They're all really key, and that's very encouraging to hear that.
Not feel guilty.
Not feel guilty, yeah, because that's a feeling that I find is quite common amongst this group, and often people with migraine are very that can be quite hard on themselves, and they try to push themselves through their migraine experience to try and get back to the life that they want to lead, or that I feel sometimes that they raise very, very high levels of expectation for themselves, and I think sometimes I really feel that they could be a lot kinder to themselves, because I think they enjoy that it's such a human thing to understand that what you're going through is really, really difficult. You don't choose to have migraine. This thing has happened for the reasons, for the various reasons that I hope you talked about today. But it's really important to remember that it can make a world of difference when you do use more self-compassion with yourself or develop self-compassion skills, because they're skills, it's something about, one of the definitions of compassion, it roughly is that, it's observing suffering in yourself and others, okay? Observing it and naming it and accepting it, that it's happening, but also making a commitment to doing something about it. So I think sometimes when we think about self-compassion, and I don't know if it's just an Irish thing or is it just a human thing, but I think there's a kind of a little bit of a residual thought, or am I being a little bit soft on myself? Do you know what I mean? Am I being a bit am I going a bit too easy with myself? But true self-compassion, as I said, it's about making a decision to do something about that suffering that you have named. And if we think about why we're here today, that suffering can be encompassed by, I suppose, by the experience of your migraine. Okay, so it's really important, as far as I can understand it in my mind and the people I've worked with, that it's so important to be kind to yourself, to understand what you're going through and the implications of it, and what the bits that you're finding hard about it, but the bits that you're showing that you're really, really managing this thing as best you can, and honoring that. We all make mistakes, we all feel inadequate, but I think if you're not giving yourself the support and encouragement that you need to manage this very difficult thing, I think that's very sad. And I think as well, it is something that it's a skill, as I said, and you can learn techniques and how to do that, and often it's developing a lot of the things that we talked about in terms of the practical management of our migraine on a day-to-day basis. It's about that, trying to manage your stress a little bit, being kinder to yourself, giving some time to yourself, doing things that are relaxing. Those kind of self-compassionate pieces of practical things you can do every day are going to help you manage your migraine more effectively, because it's such a more, I suppose, empathetic and kind and gentle way of being with yourself that, again, can give you the best opportunity to cope with the very hard parts of having migraine in your life, inclusive of the cognitive difficulties that we talked about today. Okay. I suppose as well, I think, and again, I'm nearly finished here, but what I want, I hope what you come away from here today is that living with migraine is a complex thing. It's complicated from purely, on one level, dealing with the very difficult experience of the pain that you feel, but also the impact on all the different domains of cognition we talked about, and the domains of your life that it can impact. So your relationships, your work, your creativity, these all can be impacted by your experience of migraine. So if you guys can show yourself some more, okay, well, I'll put it this way. Have you not earned the right, in the very least, to more self-compassion for just being able to survive on a day-to-day basis with those very challenging aspects of your experience of migraine? You deserve self-compassion as a right, in my mind, as a human being. But I think you guys have much more credit in the bank as well, because you're dealing with this thing every single day of your life and the impacts of it, to varying degrees, obviously, because we know it's very individual. So I suppose what I want you to do is come away from today with a better knowledge, hopefully, of the cognitive aspects of or cognitive difficulties of migraine, but also understanding that you're doing a great job. You may not feel like that. You may feel that you're maybe giving out yourself a bit more than you should, but please understand that as a clinician who've worked with people with this difficulty for quite a while and other neurological difficulties, it is incredible what you guys can do to get through a very difficult situation, whether it's related to your work, your home life, your personal relationships. And managing the migraine is such a difficult thing. And I think I'm just inspired by, and I hope today that you're going to take away from this, that you should engage in more self-compassion, because you all deserve it. Okay. So the one last thing I want to talk about is, we're hoping, or near the end of the year, we're still working it out, to run a compassion-focused therapy support group for people with migraine, okay, and their experience of it. I'm hoping it's going to be online, and I'm hoping that it will be something we'll run regularly. All these different details have to be worked out, but I really think this model could be very, very helpful, and the skills that are involved in it could be really, really helpful for people who are living with migraine. So hopefully we're going to get that up and running near the end of this year. But as I know more about it and we get it structured a bit more, hopefully we can start to promote that and get people on access to that group. Again, it'll be resource dependent as well. We're not a massive organization, and I have a limited amount of time I can give, but we're hoping to get this up and running near the end of the year so that we can get a model out to people that I think that could be really, really helpful. Last slide. Oh, Kim, can you help me here?
Yeah.
So just as I said at the start, we really, really, really would encourage you to seek professional help. Talk to your GP or neurology team about things like new symptoms, worsening symptoms, disabling cognitive symptoms, comorbid conditions like I talked about, depression, anxiety, or other medical ones, medication side effects or concerns. Talk to your employer, colleagues, or school administrators to help with maybe making your work, environment or learning environment more flexible and more bespoke to your experience of migraine. You can see these. We'll be providing the MAI with handouts as well, guys, so don't worry about that. So you don't have to worry about remembering this or writing it down. I should have said that at the start, sorry. But doing things like having a quiet workspace, extended deadlines or exam times, maybe if you're going to college, and a supportive environment. And you guys have so much knowledge about your migraine, and I often find people are very open to helping people with migraine if you just go and talk to them as best you can. Now, look, you may get a different response depending on how the type of person you're dealing with, but I think it's really important. Knowledge is power. So if you can give them the knowledge of your difficulties, I think that's really important because it can help you be in a more supportive environment. And also consider psychological support if the emotional impact of migraine is significant, whether it's anxiety, depression, finding difficulty, formulating good coping strategies, or emotional support in general for this. And again, because we know managing stress is such an important part of managing the cognitive difficulties and your experience of migraine in general, stress management techniques can be really, really helpful, and psychologists, psychotherapists, etc., can be really, really helpful in managing that as well. Okay. So just to conclude, right, this is what we've tried to get through today. The cognitive difficulties related to migraine, they're not just another symptom. They're something that can be really, really impactful on a person's life, as hopefully that we mapped out today. They often can be transient, or they are mostly transient, and the impact, thankfully, usually recedes quite close to the episode ending. So that's really, really helpful to know, I think, as well. The importance of stress management, lifestyle modifications, self-monitoring, and getting the help you need is really, really important. And I know, well, guys, there's resource issues around getting support and things like that, but even the action of going to get support is helpful in and of itself.